All right, looks like we are set up and good to go. I'm going to jump over to the drawing stream layout, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I think we're good here as well. So to sort of kick off the stream for today, what we're doing is we're jumping back into the Monster Hunter Fusion project that has been shelved for a couple weeks now. We're experimenting around on some other things on stream. But I did want to get back to this one since it's one of the long-running projects here on the channel. For today's background music, I'm switching things up from the live loops. I've been doing that for almost every stream consistently, so I wanted to switch things up to this playlist I found on Spotify. It's like a dark lo-fi mix. It's got some pretty cool tracks on it, so we'll put that in the background and hopefully I don't get flagged for copyright. It's supposed to be stream safe, so we should be good there. So to do a quick recap of what we're doing here, and I'll check the audio once people start filing in. If we jump up to our sample graphic, the fusion we're working on today is fusion number 3 of the Triple Fusion project, where we're combining attributes for these creatures from Monster Hunter. We have where's my pencil? There's an ogre up here, Nargacuga over here, and Volvidon over here. And the fusion that we were working on before, we're going to try and finish up today, which shouldn't be too difficult, is a fusion between these two. And with that, we can refer back to the sample if we need it. But to look at the line work, which is what we did in the last session where I worked on these, we got the line work set up and good to go. And one thing I realized when I loaded up this particular file template, and I thought about changing it, but I figured I will leave it for this one since I don't want to mess around with all the other stuff we've done. I have my resolution set too low, and I didn't realize that until we did the character study stream before, where I was drawing humanoid characters, and realized that I'm used to working in a really high resolution so that I can get a lot of detail, and the drawing itself is very clean. And this one is set at just my regular native screen resolution. So I think it'll still be fine for the sake of the project, but I think when I move on to the next fusion in the series, I'm going to actually create a new file, and I'm going to work at a higher resolution for that one, and then I'll just remember to use that as my settings whenever I'm doing stuff like this, and that should get us some higher quality. The last thing we did in the previous session for this project is map out our color schemes and our palette for this particular creature. And what I'll do is I'll probably go through here and use the fill tools. We should be able to, we could do it while the palette guide is up here actually. Let me try. We sort of settled on a mix of these colors over here. You can see my cursor. A mix of sort of reds and lighter maroon type colors. and then a couple contrasting color tones that'll mix up some of the details here. So let's see. For this first one, yeah, I think I'm going to want to do this systematically and go through and assign all the colors for the like areas. I just wish I had more room on my desk to put my keyboard over here so I could shift click through all this and make it a little bit faster. But that's okay. It'll just take me two button presses instead of just one. And what I'm doing here is I'm wand selecting, expanding the selection by a pixel, and then just doing a quick fill using the paint bucket. And one thing I was looking at today before I got started, and I was hoping to be able to look at it on stream, but I couldn't get it set up in time, is a feature that I learned about in Clip Studio Paint, which is what I use to draw. And I didn't realize that this feature even existed until it was covered on one of my favorite art channels, which are the folks over at Drawfee. And they did a challenge video using this function of the software, and I really want to spend some time on stream experimenting with it. So if I can get it set up next time we do a drawing stream, I may devote some time looking at that. And that's the fact that there's a 3D modeler function in Clip Studio. And I don't know how new that is, but I've been using this program for a few years, and I never knew that they were looking at including a 3D modeler function, which allows you to do things like import 3D figure bases for characters or people specifically, and you can mess around with poses and dynamic camera angles and use that to establish scenes and do things like basic primary work without having to do it from scratch, which I think is really neat. As we've talked about here on my drawing streams before, I'm not good at dynamic poses. I can do neutral standing poses for humanoid type characters just fine, but when it comes to movement or any sort of dynamic angles or whatnot, I'm not good at that. I need to get better. But being able to use a 3D modeler program where I have a base that's sort of like a stock reference that I can pose in different positions and mess around at angles and basically use that as the primary for setting up a scene or a drawing would save me a ton of time. And I think it would be very useful for doing things like drawing small scenes or other things that involve characters that's not just neutral concept art. And so I plan on figuring out a way to show that off and experiment with that here on stream. It will probably be the next one because I'm going to do some research between now and the next drawing stream on how to do so. But that'll be coming because it looks like a really powerful and a neat feature to use. Oh, hey Wazzy, what's up? Welcome to the stream. Good to see you as always. I imagine you're getting ready for your big charity event this weekend. That starts tomorrow, right? Wazzy asks, is this a continuation from the last drawing stream? This isn't a continuation from the most recent one we've done, but this is a continuation from the last one for this particular project that I did probably almost a month ago now. I switched stuff up in between, but I wanted to return to this project since it's one of the long-running ones here on the channel. So like I was mentioning in the intro, what we did on the last session for this particular fusion project was get the line work set up for this creature that we're looking at here. And so today I want to get the color assignment done, get the shading done, and then start on the next one in the series. At some point I'll have to figure out if I want to redraw the first of the 3 fusions, since I did it a long time ago, and I could probably improve a bit on it. But I want to get this one done first before we look at that. It looks like I didn't have these little ridges tagged on the color palette guide. I was going to make them the same color. Hey, what's up, Edward? Hope you're having a good evening. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, Wazzy, I don't know if you heard me talking about it before you jumped on, but I was talking about how I just recently learned that Clip Studio Paint, which used to be Manga Studio, has a 3D modeler program built in, or a function. I just learned about it yesterday, and it allows you to do things like, I think it probably allows you to straight up model, although what I want to use it for is importing bases for figures in order to manipulate poses and look at camera angles. It's a really neat feature, and I plan on figuring out how it works and how to actually show it before the next drawing stream. I was trying to do it today, but I didn't have time. From what I've seen, you can basically load up canvases like this and then import set bases that people have created, and then it functions kind of like an animation program where you have the ability to manipulate different parts of the models, kind of like a skeleton. And like, let's say you have a model of a person that you add in, you can change the orientation, the limbs, the angles, everything like they were a free-form kind of mannequin type. Oh, whoops. You can use it to establish scenes. It looks really cool. So we'll look at that at some point once I figure out how to actually load it up. Is it like Live 2D? No, it's more like Blender, from what I've seen. You're basically loading in a model, and you can change things. I think it's behaving in a 3D space. So you're actually working in 3 dimensions in like a 3D modeling program like Maya or Blender. And I'm assuming there's a central camera setting that you can use where it's basically like a scene capture, and you can kind of point it towards your model, and like if you wanted to do a real dynamic bottom up looking at the model's face. You could do that. It's very powerful from what I've seen. And so I would use that for establishing poses and setting up scenes for characters, since I'm not very good at doing that dynamically from scratch. And you can basically set that as like a background layer in the interface here, and then start drawing on top of it, doing things like you're sketching in your primary, and then doing your line work and everything else without having to create a primary from scratch. You know, like I've done before, where, you know, I'm trying to create a person, create the pose, and do something like that. Instead, you're working with a 3D model that you can basically pose any way you want, and then change how you're viewing it, and then that's your primary, and you just start drawing on top of it. It's really neat. So that'll be coming soon. I'm gonna do some research on that this weekend.
His heart action is unnaturally fast.
I call that a stab in the heart.
I'm sorry, is there any music?
Alright, we're getting into the smaller areas here. I'm going to continue to work through and form fill. And at some point I'm going to need to actually go in and start cleaning up the sections by hand.
No doubt about that.
To get all the flats done.
It's blood, there's no doubt about that. It will devour you bit by bit.
I think I can take the color guide off now. I have a pretty good idea of what colors I want to go where. I just need to start filling them in. Make sure I'm not obscuring the canvas too much here. I could select some of these small areas, in fact. Or not one, I could actually lasso select some of these, that might be easier. That'll do for some of these smaller sections. While I'm doing the color assignment, which again is not really going to be much on the commentary side since I'm just dropping colors into the respective sections here, there was some stuff I wanted to talk about, and I was debating whether or not to move it to the upcoming chill stream, or if I had time to talk about it here on this one, do it here. And rather than take up time away from the tier lists on the chill stream, I guess I could talk about it here, since again I'm not really going to need to talk about the drawing much here, probably until we get through shading. Most of the commentary for these is going to come from doing the initial line work and everything else. So what I wanted to talk about was something I hinted at a couple streams ago, and it's fairly recent news in the world of VTubing. And I do like to occasionally talk about news and things noteworthy that have happened in the VTuber scene, and so I keep pretty close tabs on that stuff. And that was the recent debut of the current generation of Hololive EN. And I've talked a lot about the Holo EN first group that debuted, Myth, which is one of my favorite sets of VTubers in general. But recently, last week or the week before now, the next generation of talent for Hololive EN debuted, and that was the Hololive Council. Or Holo Council, I think, as they're called in short form. And there's a bit of press and hype around them. They didn't do an extended marketing campaign. I think they only really started talking about them within a month of the actual debut. And it was 5 members in total that debuted on this in the course of 2 days, I think it was. I wasn't able to catch their debuts live. I had to watch the archives and catch up after that. But I did want to talk about the debuts and what I thought and what I observed in the latest round of talent, because they had an interesting approach. And I figured I could talk a little bit about that here, sort of like a news roundup while I'm just doing color assignment. So unlike Holo Myth, which was, again, the first group of English-speaking talent to come out of the big Hololive machine, for the Council, they went with a bit more of an abstract approach to the character lore and design. Whereas Myth were sort of concept character-based talent. And by that I mean you have like Gargura, who's a shark from Atlantis. You have Ninomai Inanis, who's basically like a Cthulhu priestess. And they're all based around kind of like mythological-ish concepts. Well, the Holo Council went for a bit more of an abstract concept for their latest round of characters, which was interesting. So it's basically ideas or abstract concepts instead of things like physical creatures or people. And so you have those ideas represented by the different VTubers, and they're all part of this governing council, is according to the lore. And I thought that was a really interesting approach to take when it came to putting together a batch of talent. It definitely is a different take compared to the first round they did for EN. And so after observing the debut streams and some of the subsequent streams for the Holo Council, I wanted to talk a bit about what I observed and my thoughts. Because, like I've said before, I understand that not everyone might be a big fan of Hololive since they're one of the big corporations in the VTubing world. One thing I think they've always done well between their Japanese group, their EN group, their Indonesian group, and everything else in between is they've done a good job of curating a good collection of talent and diverse backgrounds and personalities when it came to people that they hire to sign on for their projects. And I think that's really important to point out and at least acknowledge, even if you don't like the fact that they're a large corporation. They know what they're doing when they're putting these groups of talent together. So of the Holo Council, of the 5 members, the first one I saw was Tsukumo Sana. But I figured I'd just go through the different members and what I observed from their debuts and their content since. And Sana is the representation of space. So kind of like your galactic entity of kind of like the cosmos and whatnot. That's her whole thematic angle. And from what I've seen of Sana, she kind of has these. She gives off the vibes of like the mother figure of the group. Pretty mellow. I believe she speaks English and Japanese, and I think she's Australian based on her accent. And her streams have a pretty kind of mellow vibe to them. There's like a hint of kind of lewdness under the surface that I've seen. But Sana seems to mesh well with the others. The next one that I observed was Ceres Fauna. And what they've done with the way they've broken out the EN characters is they follow the Japanese model of last name first and then followed by first name. So for Sana's her first name, and her given or family name is Tsukumo. And for Fauna, her last name is Ceres and her first name is Fauna. And the concept behind Fauna is that she's the embodiment of nature, like a mother nature type figure. And her design is based on the mythical creature, the Kirin, the kind of horse, dragon, deer of mythology. And I know for the debut stream on Fauna, she definitely seemed like the most kind of say-so and pure of the group. But I think that was part of an illusion, because since she's been streaming, you can tell that she's definitely not 100% wholesome like she initially appeared, which is kind of funny. I actually watched one of her recent streams that she did where she played the old game Spore from the late 2000s, I think, and it was a really funny stream. Her sense of humor is pretty on point, and that actually gave me the idea that I needed to go back and check that game out. And so that may be coming on the channel at some point soon. But I like Fauna. Again, she's pretty mellow, I've noticed. And the next one of the 5 Holo Council is Nanashi Mume. And character-wise, she is, I think, a bird, an owl maybe. Her abstract concept that she represents is civilization. So the formation of societies, cities, and civilizations over time. And the interesting part of her lore is that since she's existed since the dawn of civilization, she has a really bad memory. So she forgets important details all the time. But kind of like Sana and Fauna, Mume's vibe is very mellow and chill, but she seems like the most say-so of the group, the innocent, pure one. Watching her sort of play off of the others in the collabs that I've seen them do so far has been pretty interesting. But I know a lot of the fan base has taken a liking to her. You see a lot of the protect the owl at all costs in chat, which is pretty funny. The fourth member of Holo Council is Oro Crony. And she was the second of the members that I saw. I'm sort of going in like a reverse order for how I watched their debuts and was checking their content out. But Crony's representation, if you can tell by her name, is time. Is essentially the representation or goddess of time, which plays pretty well off of Sana, who's space, time and space. And Crony gives off kind of a powerful aura in her content, I've noticed. I think she has a background in voice acting. It definitely seems like that. But like the others, she has kind of a mellow vibe, but a bit more of a stronger presence than the others. Not quite as, not timid, but a bit more assertive. And just based on the content I've seen her do, she gives off big Callie vibes. If you compare her to someone else in EN, a lot of her temperament and her overall style reminds me a lot of Morty, which is pretty cool. And Crony has a pretty interesting sense of humor as well. It definitely seems like, because the Holo Council group is still new, they're still kind of getting acclimated to streaming in general and interacting with each other. All of the Hololive groups were kind of like that in the beginning, and then as they kind of get familiar and situated, then they tend to ease in the whole character-based personality thing over time. And then the fifth and final member of Holo Council, I think she was the last to debut as well, is the Rat, Hakos Bells. And I watched her debut first, probably because it was the most recent if she was the last one. And she is the representation of chaos, which is very apparent in her character design when you see like her model and everything else and everything that went into her design. I will say that all the Holo Council members' designs and art is very well done. I think they got some pretty well-known artists to work on the character and live 2D models. They're very detailed and very diverse. But for Bells, she is essentially, to me, the next generation of Kureji Ollie. From what I can tell, she is Australian. She has a pretty noticeable accent, and she speaks a bunch of languages. I think she's only really demonstrated speaking Japanese and English. But kind of like Ollie, Bells' personality is very high energy and chaotic, as is appropriate for the representation of chaos thematically. But her debut stream was pretty fun to watch. Very interesting. If I were to pick the favorite of the group for Holo Council, my money would be on Bells. She's kind of like the Gargura of the group. A little bit higher energy, but has that same sort of embrace the meme attitude that you see in other members like Gura or Ollie. And after watching all the debuts, I'd say that Bells is my favorite. It's a very entertaining personality to watch. Second up would probably be Crony. Her overall vibe is definitely something that I'm down with. But overall, the entire Holo Council members are, like I said, diverse, and their personalities mesh well with each other. So again, props to Cover and Hololive overall for putting together the talent, because they they seem to do a good job of picking people that are going to mesh well together. So that's pretty interesting.
Why are you wasting your time on me?
A lot of people have been speculating when the collabs outside of that particular generation is going to happen, because the potential for interesting content with the first round of Hololive EN with Myth is pretty interesting. Seeing how some of the newer talent bounces off of their senpais essentially would be pretty amusing. So I'll be looking forward to seeing those collabs when they happen.
Am I wasting my time?
Alright, as we work our way across the color assignment, I'm almost done. There wasn't a ton of cleanup. Thankfully, there's not a ton of small, unfillable sections that I have to do by hand on this particular drawing. But I get the feeling if I was working at a slightly higher resolution, this would be a bit easier, but that's okay. I may have to set up a different canvas. For the next one.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
What kind of doctor? I'm not sick.
Alright, I'm gonna do a couple more passes through just to make sure I didn't miss anything, and then we'll tweak the settings on the main color palette before we move on to shading. But to wrap up the discussion on the Holo Council debuts, like I said, they're only really started promoting them, I want to say, a month before the debuts actually happened. They sort of dropped a teaser, and some of the existing EN talent was kind of talking about it on Twitter with that coming up. But it was funny in that the actual debuts ended up getting pushed back because what they call the Hololive EN curse of technical difficulties that the entire first generation of Myth experienced when they were trying to do their debuts. It hit the council as well. So they had to push the actual debuts back because the different members were running into technical difficulties. And as someone who's been streaming for a bit and is constantly worried about audio, video, and broadcast issues, I feel that. It's never fun when you have a set plan for things and then technical difficulties completely throw that out the window. Nothing else is really stressful. Alright, let's see. Let's look at our palette here. I'm gonna go over to the hues and saturations sliders, which again you guys can't see on the actual broadcast because the pop-up doesn't show. But I'm gonna mess around with the levels a little bit and see if any change to the levels is gonna give us something better that we like. Alright, definitely don't want to move that direction. If we move too far into the negative, we're gonna get into the blues and purples. Into the positive is gonna give us greens and yellows and blues at the far end. I think about here is fine. It's going to be slightly darker. I kind of want the outer shell to be a bit more red. That's going to be in line with Volvidon's color palette. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and save that. Now we can add our shading layer on top, which we'll just clip. And like I've done in the past for shading, I'm going to do a real quick rough shadow layer across the different sections. Kind of block in where I want the shadows to fall. And then as part of the final cleanup, I'll go in there and sort of trim out sections to get the sort of harder line edge that I want for shadows. Again, this just needs to be a rough block in of color in the different spots, because when I actually go in to clean it up and kind of customize the shape of this where the shadows are falling, that'll come into play there.
For a few coins, I shall hypnotize
I guess for this particular type of shading, the light's kind of coming from out here. I have it clipped so you can't see me drawing, but it's from this way, kind of shining over the creature. I'll kind of experiment with where the shadows are falling, but right now I'm just trying to get some approximate stuff blocked in. We'll do all of the red shell sections. I'm going to do this kind of in order, unlike before where I was just sweeping through. And then once we do the red sections, I'll probably move on to the kind of tan main body, then probably from there the spikes. Sort of trim things out here. As we sort of proceed through, it's like I could sort of talk a little bit about some of the other updates and stuff coming here on the channel. We've got some really interesting things in the works for kind of the general quality of life and administrative parts of the channel. I won't get into them here because there's no real point, but I am excited about some of the stuff that's in the works. As far as upcoming content, specifically for next week, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do and focus on for that week's worth of streams. I do think we're going to continue to keep Nocturne on the back burner for now. I haven't been able to go in and start grinding and working on my teams before we proceed into the next leg of the game. While he says, "Woo, administration, everybody's favorite." Because I don't really have a dedicated forum for talking about just channel updates. That's why I tend to put stuff like that just wherever. And it wouldn't be that interesting for you guys to just hear nothing but pure silence as I'm shading the stuff here. So I figure we can talk about just some ideas that I have kicking around. Yeah, we will get back to Nocturne at some point in the near future. Maybe in 2 weeks, depending on how much time I've got. I do want to continue looking at Punishing Grey Raven. I've been tinkering around with that game offline a little bit and trying to learn. And I think I understand a bit more of some of the gear and whatnot that we were looking at before. Like how to equip characters and whatnot. But I want to at least play through the main story for that game, because it is interesting. It's a lot of reading though, since it's not voiced for all of the cutscenes. I have to read all the dialogue. That's the only downside of that game. But for non-gaming related content, other stuff that was thinking about doing, I thought about potentially doing a Q&A stream, which would be part of the chill stream format. But I could do a thing where I basically open up a Q&A thing online to allow people to ask me questions, and then I answer them on stream. But I could do something like add a twist, kind of akin to Hot Ones on YouTube, where like I have to answer the questions while eating hot sauce. So it'd be kind of a Q&A / punishment stream, which I haven't done yet here on the channel. But that could be fun. It would either be something like that through a Q&A punishment stream, or like I play a difficult game and every time I die I have to like eat something with hot sauce on it, or something similar like that. I'll have to think about that particular format type, because while I do like the tier list, I don't want that to be the sole focus of every single chill stream going forward. This one coming up this weekend will probably be the last tier list one for a little bit, while I look around and see if I can find some more. I am still considering the idea of doing like a My Anime list discussion on stream too. I'm not afraid of getting canceled for my opinions, but maybe I will if I do one based on anime, since that always seems to make people mad. Can also do a movies tier list. Problem is I don't watch a lot of movies now, but I used to. When I was in Earth School, I used to watch a lot more movies. Maybe something like a comedy or maybe action movie tier list. I don't really watch drama and romance movies or horror. Like classic action movies or even sci-fi. I watched a decent amount of sci-fi. Something like that could be fun. Alright, let's see. Is that it for all of the red sections? That should be fine. Like I mentioned, this is a rough blocking in of where I want the shadows and highlights to fall, and then I'll go in and refine it a little bit when I go to do the cleanup.
Look, I don't blame you for being edgy, but get this straight.
Alright, let's keep working through. There'll be a decent amount of sections to shade with this sort of darker tan brown color. Another update for something that I've mentioned a couple times on stream that I've actually started getting some traction on, or putting it off for forever, is the spot for the BGM tracks. It's a place to host. I think I mentioned a couple streams ago that I did set up a Bandcamp account. It's a pretty straightforward process, and I'm right now doing the final recording and tagging of the tracks to be uploaded there. What I found out, and I don't know if this has to do with the fact that it's just a function of their free service for artists, but they have a specific file type format that they require in order for you to upload stuff, and it's not one I normally use. It's .flac format, and I know for Bandcamp, just because there's some artists that I do follow on there, they do have the ability to let you choose your file format type when you download tracks off Bandcamp. I just don't know if that's only something that you have to subscribe to their premium service to get. But I'm going to look into that a little bit more once I have all of the tracks finished. Because I would like to give people the flexibility to choose what sound format they get, since I don't use FLAC personally. Most of the stuff that I download and play is MP3. So that's the last major thing I need to figure out for the Bandcamp hosting, and then once that's figured out, I should be able to just upload everything and then put a link out. So if people want to download the BGM tracks for the stuff I've made and use it for stuff like YouTube content or whatever, it'll be there in a convenient spot where you can get at it. I think if they have it gated behind a premium service, I'd probably pay for it just to help give people the flexibility. I gotta figure out how much that would cost, but it doesn't look too bad. I did notice that for the base Bandcamp service, the free download feature is limited to a certain amount of downloads per month. I think it's something like each song gets 200 free downloads a month. And I don't know what happens after that, if it's blocked off or put behind like an ad wall or something. But I will figure that out as well. If their paid service means you can give people infinite free downloads, then I'd probably subscribe for that too. For all of the BGM stuff we've been creating on stream and whatnot, the intention isn't to put that up behind a paywall. It's just basically free resources for people to use. So I'll figure out the best way to deal with that. Alright, we'll keep working our way down lower body and the tail. And then we can move on to some of the smaller sections, which shouldn't take quite as long. Alright, we'll keep it approximate where we're blocking stuff in. Get the underside of the tail here. Alright, now we can go and do the highlights for these slightly darker, kind of fleshy sections. Oh, another content side discussion that I've mentioned a few times on stream, and it's been kind of in the background, is the idea of doing a media share. And I keep talking about it and haven't actually committed to doing it. I think September is going to be the month to experiment around with the idea of media shares. I will figure out when this month I want to do that, but I think we're due for a Beatbox media share stream. And in between now and whenever that happens, I'll need to actually put together the content that I want to talk about and share. But that will be coming relatively soon. And that should be interesting for any of the folks that are watching this now or tuning in later. If you're interested in learning about the beatbox scene and what's out there, and especially what the pros look like, because again, I'm an amateur hobbyist when it comes to beatboxing. The pros out there in the scene at the competitive level are absolutely nuts, and I definitely want to show some of that off. So that'll be the focus of the first media share here. Alright, I think that's it for the connective tissue sections. Now we can do the spikes and claws. guess I'll go along the back first. Make sure and save. Looks like there's some missing spots I need to fix. Do a layer check to make sure I haven't been shading the wrong layer too. Good example. Oh, it looks like I switched shades to something darker at some point. Fix that here. Yeah, that'll work fine. Just need to make sure it's consistent. A little bit of shadows on the teeth. Now the tongue. I think it's just the eyes now. Or eye. Alright. Now I can go through and clean up the edges on all the shading and then we'll be done. I guess I can just go through each section. I don't need to do it by color here.
When I held you in my arms, I felt a strange sensation. Waiting to receive life. Who in their right mind would believe a man had returned from the dead? You've been living in the shadow.
Oh, I think I missed this entire section up here on the shoulder. Yeah. Oh, did I forget to do the claws down here too? So. Alright, we'll keep cleaning up things around stuff like the spikes and the kind of shelled plated armor. It's mostly just a matter of getting the lines clean, sharpened up a little bit.
Back to the animalistic. A monster that lies within each of us.
All right, moving our making our way down further, getting close to the lower half of the creature here. Since we were talking about content ideas earlier, and this is really more of a brainstorming out loud thing to talk about, another content type that I think would be really interesting, but I'm not putting it super high on priority list, but I do think it'd be fun to try at some point, would be a watch-along stream. And I know a lot of other content creators have done something similar, but a watch-along stream would be something like where I'm watching a movie and providing my own commentary and talking about it, but it's not part of the broadcast because that's a good way to get copyright struck. Instead, what people will do is they will put up a time counter for the movie when they're watching. There's no audio or video coming from whatever it is they're watching on, be it YouTube or another streaming platform, but they basically tell the audience, here's where we're starting the watch along from, and then the audience goes and watches it on their own computer or device, and they're basically following along with the person who's watching it. And I think that could be a fun thing to do, since there's a lot of older movies, specifically from the 80s and whatnot, that I would have things to talk about if we were watching. It's a bit more coordination and planning to set something like that up, though. So we'll see. That could be a thing in the future as we get more people tuning in. Kind of like a community event where we all essentially watch a movie and talk about it. So I gotta think of some good ones from like the action and comedy side. That would be fun to watch and react to and talk about. Alright, we're just about done with the cleanups on the highlights and shadowing. I think I just need to do the plates on the tail and then do kind of like a final sweep, and then I think we are done with the creature design here. Alright, let's zoom out, save our progress up to this point, and do kind of our final checks. Okay, I'm going to dump all this into its own folder so I can move it around. And then we'll do a comparison against our sample and wrap up this one. I think I unofficially decided this one was going to be called Nargadon. Combination of Nargacuga and Volvidon. Alright, I'm just going to dump all the relevant layers into one spot here. Alright, using our original fusion guide for the components of the creature that we are finishing up here, we are using the quote-unquote flying wyvern body type for Narga. Again, this thing is flightless, it doesn't have wings, but it does have the same sort of quadrupedal, more low-to-the-ground form for Narga. It's a bit of a hard comparison here because Volvidon, it does go on all fours sometimes, but it's usually on an upright posture, standing on its hind legs. And so the actual body type for each of these creatures is going to be driven by their primary pose or stance or whatever it is whenever they're walking around. We essentially have a quadruped for the fanged wyverns, which is an ogre. We have quadrupedal for the flying type wyvern for Narga, and bipedal by default for Volvidon here. The fusion creature takes a lot of design elements from Volvidon with its heavy armored shell and spikes. Because this thing is flightless and most likely going to be a little bit slower, as a result, it's more heavily armored, more of a defensive type creature. Some of the noteworthy features it retains between the two of its components are its kind of jagged shelled beak that Narga has here. The plates on the tail, which resemble the bristles that Narga has as well, are present. I imagine this thing wouldn't have the ability to necessarily flare them out like Narga does, but it would still function like a weapon. This thing could use its tail kind of like a spiked whip. One of the most noteworthy features from Volvidon, obviously its tongue. The fusion retains that. It's one of the most signature features from the fusion components. I think it would be missing that major element if we left it off. And other than that, there aren't a whole lot of specific elements that I included. Going for a quadrupedal, flightless flying wyvern, in quotes, was kind of the original idea that I had for this fusion number 3 here. But the actual execution was a challenge. I kept Volvidon's weird digging claws that it's got on the front legs, and then the back legs are more similar to what Narga's got. I think that does carry some of the noteworthy design elements through. This one's kind of a mix as far as the proportion of the components. It may be a bit more close to Volvidon since it doesn't have fur. This thing is more of a kind of a tough armored scaly skin, while Narga has pretty pronounced fur patterns on its body. It has scales and whatnot on its limbs, but overall its body is fur covered. So that element did not carry through to the fusion. But let's go ahead and hide this and the sample. Yeah, I think this one will do. We can kind of compare it in size and scale to the other one that we did, the first fusion. Scale-wise is something that I will finalize when I put these into their combined render. It doesn't need to be something we iron out now. These aren't necessarily to scale. I think they'd be pretty close to the same size. The first one, this one right here is Xenokuga. The first one we did on stream, but technically the second one in the series of 3. I imagine it would be bigger than Nargadon, but we'll figure the final scaling out later. That's not really important. But I think for the sake of the concept drawing for these 3, I think we're making good progress. I'll have to import the first one, the first fusion, which was Zinogre and Volvidon, the very first one I did before I started doing this on stream. I'll have to import that later. In fact, maybe for the remainder of our time on stream today, I can tinker around with some potential sketch concepts for an alternate version of that first fusion. In fact, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to go refill my water bottle. And then what I think I'll do is I'll set up a new canvas at the optimal resolution that I'm used to working at. And then we'll experiment around with some concepts and just see if we get something that's going to be a bit more up to date than the original, and then maybe I can work on sketching a primary for that. We'll see how much time we've got. Maybe the next time we can do the inking and coloring for that one. We'll see. But first I'm going to go get some more water. I will be back in just a minute. All right, we're back. Let me here. I think what I will do, just so I'm being consistent, I'm going to open up the character concept drawing we worked on last time. And I'm going to use this as the resolution. That way I am being consistent and I don't have to worry about changing the settings. Hey, what's up, Ryan Gosling? Welcome to the stream. Let's call this Fusion. Yeah, we'll just stick this here for now. I'm gonna clear this off. I think what I'll do is I'll import the sample from our previous one. Then everything else I will do from scratch on the new resolution. Let's see, should be able to just copy paste this into the new template. Yeah. Okay, I can scale this up for the sake of demonstrating what the Fusion parameters are in case I need to refer back to it. When I do the final renders, I will be exporting all of the individual drawings, and then the actual template for the Fusion diagram in the final is going to be different. So I'm not too concerned about scaling here. Alright, this will be the layout we use in the future. I'm a little bit bothered that I forgot I used to work at this high resolution, when it should mean that the end product's going to come out a lot better. But we can do... Let's see, I said we would tick around at some potential primaries for an alternate version of Fusion 1. So let me zoom out again. Fusion 1 is between Zinogre and Volvidon. Again, this is one I drew a long time ago. And it's functional, but I think I might be able to update the design a little bit since we're doing these now. I'm going to zoom in a bit. And I'm going to do something I haven't really done so far for primary work. And this is going to hopefully make things easier when I start sketching out the main primary for the creature pose. This will be an experiment. I'm going to work at a smaller level and try and just get a rough series of proportions. And this is mostly just to sort of really roughly sketch out the proportions for the creature. And then from there, I'll work on actually roughing in things like the sketch details and all that. And this isn't something I've done, but I have done this in the past. For this particular fusion, the first one in the series, It does have the same body type as Volvidon, the quote-unquote bear body type for this particular species in Monster Hunter. And they tend to be larger, more bipedal. They don't have to be necessarily. So it'd be something like this. But as far as proportions go, I like the idea of a kind of more hunched over creature. This is going to be taking kind of a page out of Gos Harag from Monster Hunter Rise, the latest title that came out in the series. It's kind of a big, hulking, hunched over beast as opposed to sort of an upright. It's semi-upright, I guess. And I like the idea of the bears having these long, well-developed arms, shorter, stocky legs, but all the power is going to be primarily coming from upper body. So if we move this a bit off to the side, we can start tinkering around with the proportions here. And I foresee doing something like large paws, with kind of claws coming off like this. And I do want to include a tail since Zenogre's got a pretty recognizable tail. What I'm doing here is putting some really rough guiding lines about where specifically everything is falling. I think this particular sort of pose is going to be what we're looking for. I'm going to have to do this twice. I'm going to have to do this for fusion number 1 that we're sort of redoing. And then I'm going to have to do it for the final one because, in case I haven't mentioned it before, the final big fusion of all of the components is going to be the bear body types. I have to choose one dominant body type for the final. And it's going to have elements of all of the fusions that came before it. Let's see. What we can do is take this. Scale it up to our actual image that we're going to be doing here. And then I'm going to start doing a more defined primary based on this one. Actually, before I do that, let's get rid of this one, get it off the canvas. Where'd my... If I accidentally hid what I was doing. Alright, whatever, let's do it again. Alright, this is going to become our new rough outline for the primary. And now we actually are going to start putting in some more defined details. It's kind of hard to see. What I'm doing here is following the guidelines for the real rough basic shape primary, and I'm going to actually start giving this thing a defined outline, and then from there I'm going to actually start putting in details. And from here, we can do things like play around with the positioning, the angle, and everything else before we start putting in the actual details of the primary sketch here. Like, this thing has a bit of a lean to it, so I can straighten that up a little bit and just rotate it ever so slightly. Yeah, that's better. And what I can do, let's move this off to the side here. This will be our first primary. I think I'll do 2 of them in total. The first one, again, just basic shapes. Getting a feel for where everything's gonna kind of fall. The second one's gonna be more sketched in details. And then after that it'll be line art. But if we put our sample up, I do want to draw sort of a face to give us a starting point when we get to the more specific details. See how we're going to kind of define the facial features on the fusion itself. Again, we got to combine Zinogre and Volvidon's features on the face. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at how we can do that. We definitely want to make sure we're not getting too close to the tropes of the previous fusions that we've done. So I like the idea of maintaining the kind of shelled plating. You can have that running along the entire upper part of the jaw. And this is a side profile facing this way. We can include the ears. Maybe have the eye a little bit more recessed in and kind of sunk in like that. So we'll flip back. Let's keep an eye on what we did here so we can make it more distinct. I do want this thing to have fur. Zinogre's got a mix of sort of heavy shell plating, and it does have fur on certain parts of its body. I definitely want this particular fusion to have that.
There's something wrong with me. I have the ability to kill.
Thought about doing the kind of shelled lower jaw that Zinogre has, this right here, but we already put that design element on the Narga fusion. So rather than do that, I think I'm gonna leave that off, but keep the shells along the jaw. Let's get some room here. Could have the fur coming off this way and sort of going down the body. In fact, we could do something kind of similar to what Gos Harag does and have, I'll put this on a new layer. Could have the fur going off this way and sort of spilling down over the shoulders. Like so, maybe going down the back, but ending here and then having the plated armor and shelled bits sort of continuing down the torso and whatnot. That way it looks almost like this thing's wearing a fur coat. That might not be a bad way to introduce the concept of the fur while also working with the shell attributes. Let me pull up the previous one I did. I should be able to find it. Yeah, it's in a different directory. Give me 1 second. I'll pull it up. We can compare. Let's see, where did I put it?
I'm just me. I'm the only me.
I think it's this one. Yeah. What resolution did I do this set of drawings at?
I'm just me.
Okay.
I'm the only me.
This one's definitely scaled up higher than what I was working at. That doesn't really matter here. This was the previous iteration of that first fusion I did. Again, this was done a long time ago. I think it's okay, but I think it could be done a lot better. I think switching up how the shell pattern and the fur, and specifically the head shape, could be done with a little bit more detail. Which is why we're revisiting this here. That drawing itself is probably 2 years old at this point.
I'm just me. I'm the only me.
We could do something like this, where the fur is going that way down the back. Yeah, I like that idea. I think I want to run with that. For details on the face. We've already got the horns that go this way from Zinogre. That's on the other second fusion we did as well. So I kind of want to keep the plating on this part of its head relatively simple. And we start looking at things like the armor. Then we can get back into the sort of heavy shelled plating that Volvidon has in the armor. Alright, let's move this up into the corner. I'm going to start doing an initial primary for the full body on the creature. We'll start experimenting around with some ideas. I think for the stream today, I want to get through the preliminary primary on this one. And then maybe on the next session, we'll actually ink, color, and shade. We'll do it all in one. Alright, let's work with the ideas we sort of put together here. Let's start getting some rough details put in. We'll do a closed jaws mouth on this one. Move the head outwards a little bit. to do kind of a rough fur pattern here, just kind of following along the back and shoulders like I mentioned before, just to have it in there. I like the idea of the armored plates kind of running along the tops of the arms. Again, functioning kind of like crafted armor.
We were afraid you might laugh at us.
And originally I had an idea for kind of
What is the purpose of this autopsy?
You believe
like these gauntlet looking things, but I think I want to switch up the way I had the hands. Kind of these large paws, and I have to figure out how I want to actually show the detail there. You could do something like this, where there's armored plates running along the front of the body. And obviously it continues on this way to the tail. You can have the fur running all the way to the length of the tail like that. That I may change later.
Poor woman, she's almost out of her mind.
Welcome to Aunt Martha's King Edward Hotel. Hardly anyone ever checks in. Nobody ever checks out.
Put in some rough outlines and details for the feet. I think I'd want to include the sort of shelled pattern on the feet too. But for now, I'm just roughing in where they'd be located. we have the plates kind of running. The direction can be cleaned up later if we end up going with that. Let's see, what do we have? The previous one had the plates running along the tail. I think I want to switch that up too. I think I'd rather have the fur running along the tail, and then it just continue the same plating from the chest, underbelly side like that.
Behind each door, there's a private server. Welcome to Aunt Martha's King Edward Hotel. Hardly anyone ever checks in. Nobody ever checks out. Welcome to Aunt Martha's King Edward Hotel. Hardly anyone ever checks in. Nobody ever checks out. Welcome to Aunt Martha's King Edward Hotel. Hardly anyone ever checks in. Nobody ever checks out. Welcome to Aunt Martha's King Edward Hotel. Hardly anyone ever checks in. Nobody ever checks out.
I think I do want to give this thing a thumb. I'll sort of put that in that spot. Again, this particular primary is, again, I keep saying again, but point is to keep the details still rough and sketchy, and then finalize things with another one if I need to. For the feet, you definitely want to put the claws in here like this. We could do sort of the shelled plating. It almost looks like gauntlets from Zinogre here on the feet. That could work. Make sure to include the right number of toes, though. I may have to do some more work on this left paw here. Some of the details are getting a little bit obscured. But I think based on what we've defined here on the right, that's going to be what we go forward with for the layout of the arms. Just needs to be refined a little bit. delete the underlying primary. Alright, I'm going to zoom out, do kind of a final pass through here, and then I think we will wrap up for today. Like I mentioned, the point of this is to get some ideas together in kind of rough sketch format. And then next time we will finish refining this. Probably won't need to do a whole new primary. I'll think about it. But once we have everything finalized, we can move on to inking and coloring. And if we flip over to the old one for this fusion number 1, which I'm calling vulgar, I think the pose is much better now. This one here, again, this is an old drawing, but it's a little bit static. It looks kind of stiff the way it's standing, almost like it's a stuffed model, like a taxidermy model, just sort of stuck in place. This pose, which we can probably tweak a little bit, work on things like the perspective angles and clean that up later. But this looks like a bit more of a natural stance that the creature would have, kind of this leaning forward, lumbering creature. Doesn't look like it's just pasted on a platform like a mannequin. So even though I don't like doing duplicate work, because I started this fusion project a long time ago, I think it'll be good to go back, revisit the older one, and kind of do the first fusion justice. Because if I put them all together based on these two that we've done, I think it's going to be a little jarring. Again, this one's passable, but I think it can be done better. So we'll move forward with this. Coming up with the final fusion of all of them is going to be a challenge, I think. I'm going to have to create a bear type pose and layout without just straight up copying this one. That's why I'm not going super detailed on this one, because it's not the final fusion. It's the first level fusion, technically the first in the series. If I have any other ideas offline on things I want to change with this, I might do that and sort of refine the sketch. That way we can go straight into line work and coloring and shading the next time. But I think that will do it for today's drawing stream. We finished one fusion, which is my main priority, and we're working on the next one, going back in the series. But once again, thanks to all the folks who stopped by to hang out. I think this was productive, and we'll be returning to this project relatively soon. Like I said in the beginning, I want to find a way to focus on that 3D modeling function for Clip Studio. So maybe the next drawing stream will be part demoing for the modeler, and then maybe we'll come back to the Fusion project. We'll see. But in the meantime, once again, thanks for hanging out. I will catch you guys later. Have a good evening.
The music has bizarre intonation, and the singing is almost disinterested. I heard rumors of its existence. Now I've heard it.